My name is Leora Alderson, and I'm here today with a good friend, Reid Lance Rosenthal, who is an author of a best-selling historical romantic Western series called Threads West. And Reid is the real deal, and I can't wait to get started with not only catching up with him myself, but sharing Reid with you, with the audience. So Reid, it's been way too long, and I know that because we're both crazy busy, and you writing, not only busy really writing the next series, but also doing book signings and all that. So welcome, and how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing just fine. Not only do we have the book-related stuff going on, but we have the ranch-related stuff going on.
That's right.
And this is, summer is a busy time on the ranch between irrigating, haying, and who knows what else. And fall is a busy time because you're getting ready, you're battening down the hatches for winter. Cows are coming in and cows are going out. Horses are coming in. And like this morning, horses get out. Then you have to go chase the horses, which kind of interrupts the flow of a chapter, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Real life happens to interrupt, the fictional life that you're creating and writing each day. And so tell people where you are.
Wyoming.
Okay. So
in the Laramie Mountains of Wyoming. Our ranches are centered about 20 miles southwest of Douglas. It's about 4 hours north of Denver. Great country, sparsely settled. Our nearest neighbor is, give or take miles away. Suits me fine. I'm not partial to lights or roofs.
There you go. Well, but you're definitely the land guy. And, Reid and you and I met about in 2010. And we were both basically looking to find better ways to market the creations the things that we were putting out in the world, the things that we were writing, the books that you were writing, the workouts that I was creating. And you struck me then, and definitely even the more I know you, as a man on a mission. A multi-talented artist, and yet a really down-to-earth brilliant real estate guy and rancher that you're doing. So share some of the things before we get in. There's so many areas that we can go with you, because there's so much that you're doing and that you know how to do. So what I want to focus on for today, and maybe we can do more than one, is essentially, since this is for best boomers and beyond, and you, like I am we're both baby boomers, where it seems to me that in our second half of life, we are really, we're catching the world on fire with our second half of life, all the more than we did it the first half. Would that be a fair statement for you? Setting the world on fire?
Taking names.
Right. And you definitely are. And so, so part of what we're going to talk about is when it is that you decided to start writing, because that wasn't your first career. You started writing your second half of your life, essentially, basically about 6-7 years ago now, right?
Well, if you go to my websites, the publisher's website is threadswestseries.com. Threads is in sewing, but Threads of Lives is the significance. threadswestseries.com or reidlancerosenthal.com. There's a story on there, one of the blogs, Why I Write. I decided I would write books when I was 9 years old. It just took me, 40, I'll leave it at 40 plus years to kick myself in the butt and get it done. And both series, the nonfiction series, Land for Love and Money, which has also been a #1 national bestseller, Best Real Estate Book of the Year, USA Book Review, Best Business Reference Book of the Year, Best Current Events Book, et cetera, et cetera. And the Threads West series, which is really, it's a huge story. It's an epic saga that begins right here in the territories, 1854. And you have the threads of lives of brave men, independent women, some from Europe, England, Ireland, Norway, Denmark, Prussia, an American trapper, an Oglala Sioux family, a Ute Indian family, an elderly black couple setting their life sails for the winds of freedom, a Spanish vaquero chased north by the Texas Rangers in the Texas Revolt. In book 4, you'll meet the Asian character, the Asian line of the epic saga. Wang Fu, shanghaied in Shanghai, when he wakes up after the drugs wear off, he's on forced labor, throwing track west from the Pacific. It is, in all respects, it's a story of America set in the West. It's a story of us. And it is a mission, I think Americans as a whole have lost touch with who we are. So this story, in addition to hopefully delighting people, and it seems to be delighting hundreds of thousands of readers around the country, and it's about 50-50 guy and gal readership, very unusual, and a mini-series starting to take shape for the end of 2016, which is very exciting.
Awesome.
It is my attempt to reacquaint Americans with what the hell this country is. And, it is all of us. Unlike other countries, America is a tapestry. If you think of any other country in the world, even our closest ally and neighbor, Canada, is a mosaic. You have French Quebec, and you have the Native American populations up in the Yukon and the Northwest Territories. You have the Western thinking people in Alberta and British Columbia. You have the Mennonites of Saskatchewan. I mean, they're really separate and distinct communities who rarely interact, try not to interact with one another. I mean, there's a lot of enmity. And while you have some of that in this country, because it's fostered by the politicals in power to maintain their power, in the end, we are like a big blanket. Our tapestry, all the yarns are interwoven. And each yarn, each ethnicity, each race, each creed, each belief, each origin may have a different texture. It may be a different thickness. It may be a different color, but it's all one blanket. So Threads West, an American Saga, is that story.
And I'm glad you mentioned the websites and all that, and we'll definitely put that in when we post the interview on the Best Boomers and Beyond site. We'll include the links. So it's threadswestseries.com. Is that right? Threadswest.com.
Yes, Threads West Series.
And reidlancerosenthal.com as well. And
people call me worse.
Your writing is very rich. In fact, I was going to ask you to read a couple paragraphs. How would you feel about reading a couple paragraphs from the About Reid part of your website? I just love the 3 paragraphs where you start out, many have queried as to why I decided and what inspires me to write it. It would be great to hear it from your voice, and if not now, then near the end of the interview. How would you feel about that?
If I can manage, Leora, what the audience has not seen is the hour of fumbling around as you try and instruct the cowboy from 2,000 miles away on his first introduction to Zoom.
All right.
So, my phone is down to the last bar. I got 31 minutes left on the computer.
Okay.
And for me to try and bring up that website, now that we finally got the Zoom thing working, you really don't want to go there, do you?
Okay.
Do that separately, and you can splice it in.
Okay, we'll do that. Absolutely. And
Be happy
it's beautiful because I started reading and I thought, well, I'll start out reading that. And I thought, no, it really needs to be in your voice because you write so beautifully and descriptively. And I, as you know, I am not a fiction reader and haven't read fiction in many years. If I did read, I would be continuing to read your series as it is. I read most of the first one, and my family, all my family have read them all and eagerly wait the next one, but we're not going to go there at the moment. What I would like to get back to for a minute is, okay, so you thought you wanted to write at 9, but you didn't really until later in life, basically 50 years, in your 50s, right? So what is it that, do you remember the moment that you decided that's what you're going to do?
I'm sorry, didn't hear you.
Do you remember the moment when you decided that that's what you were going to do, that you were going to start writing finally from 9 years
Yes.
old, and then that broke an interrupted dream to in your 50s beginning
Absolutely.
to work?
I remember both the day, the minute the second
Wow.
that I decided I would write books. And I remember the second that I began.
So can you elaborate on that?
Well, you know, so in fourth grade, and you know, I'm fourth generation land and cattle. My folks decided they would go on a really huge trip for us. We're going to go to the St. John, the Virgin Islands. It had just become a national park. It was very rudimentary. There was only tents available for lodging, which, you know, we're fine with. And we thought, you know, nobody's going to be down there yet. And they had just set up Trunk Bay, the underwater. I mean, it was brand new. So it was in February during the school year. And my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Darling, you know, God bless her. In fact, she gave me a D. The best grade I got in penmanship from Mrs. Darling in the course of fourth grade was D+. And it's deteriorated since then. But Darling and said, you know, do you mind if I take a week off? And she said, listen, you can take a week off, but the prerequisite is that you must keep a journal. You have to write in that journal every day, and when you come back, you have to read it to the class. Well, you know, I was not enthused about that. I mean, God, I'm on vacation, I gotta write a journal. Ugh, yuck. Make a long story short, it was also my sister's birthday, her third birthday. And we get on the plane, first time ever on a plane, and I have my little light beige tablet. I mean, those of you who are listening who are our ages, Leora is much older than I am, but relatively within the same age. You know, you have these little beige tablets, little writing tablets you had in elementary school with these really wide white spaces between the heavy blue lines, and then the octagon Bic ballpoint pens with the thick ink that got over everything, you know, that was always on your hands. Anyway, those were my tools. And as we were coming down into the islands, you know, there was, the sea was turquoise, kind of a gray turquoise. And it was textured, almost sculptured. And there were clouds, just little puffs of clouds. And the sun, which of course was above the plane, was directing these shadows down on the sea. So it was kind of a shadowed, mottled, gray, turquoise corduroy scene. I mean, it was spectacular, and it inspired me enough that I started to write. You know, to make a long story short, I kind of liked it. I mean, I didn't really admit it to myself, but I kind of liked it. And I really did do the journal every day. When I got back to school a week later, by the way, in the course of the adventure down there, a mongoose ate my sister's birthday cake. I don't know where my mother got a birthday cake for my sister on St. John back in 1960-something, but she did. And when we opened the box, this mongoose full of icing jumped out, raced around the tent, icing all over the canvas. It was. When I got back to school, you know, several days passed. Mrs. Darling didn't say a word. And, you know, unfortunately, a few days after my turn, she either remembered or decided to spring her trap. She goes, well, you know, Reid's going to read to us while we have lunch. Reid's going to read to us about his first day. I stood up. My hands were shaking, you know. The paper was rattling in my fingertips, and I'm thinking to myself, who wants to hear about my vacation? This is ridiculous. And, of course, you know, everybody's munching on their sandwiches or Twinkies or whatever they had. That was when Twinkies were thought to be helpful. And I started reading. And, you know, when I looked up, the entire class was staring at me. And a number of the kids, kind of their mouths were open. And Mrs. Darling clapped. And, you know, that was the moment that I realized that I could tell a story and people would listen. Mm. So it was that moment I decided I would write books. Anyway, flash forward. It's now it's actually 2009 fall, actually. And there was a huge bull elk on one of the ranches that I'd been after for 3 years. He had kicked my butt.
A bull elk.
A bull elk, yes. And he was a monster. And we had played chess on the chessboard of the land for 3 years. And, you know, I knew him, he knew me. He won, I lost. And it was one of those magical Western evenings. A new snowfall, about 6 inches, fluffy light powder. The sun was setting. The entire world was pink. You know, the sky was a reflective, literally hot pink of clouds on the eastern horizon. The moon, a full moon, was rising, and there were several ponds we had built on the ranch. And I was hunting with my old horse at that time, who's since passed, Tramp, who loved to hunt. And he had spotted the elk before I did. And the elk was higher up on a ridge, and we kind of shadowed him through the trees. Everything is, you know, whisper quiet in the snow. And I realized he was going to cross a clearing and that I would have a pretty good shot. And as I was dismounting, pulling the rifle out of the scabbard, all excited, you know, finally I'm going to win this chess game. To my right, to the west, was a small pond we had built that had not frozen yet. And, you know, it was glass smooth. And on its face, on its surface, was reflected the scene. I mean, everything. The elk, the sky, the moon, the sun. And it was so stunning that I stopped, slid my rifle back in the scabbard, and I always carried a pad, not necessarily to write down thoughts for books, but to write down stuff on the ranch, whatever I did, you know, things I had to remind myself of. I pulled out that pad, and I wrote down the scene. In the meantime, the elk, of course, is trudging across the clearing, and to this day, he died. You know, he died of old age. I mean, you know.
Well, I'm glad for that.
I got back to the house, and I wrote the first 3 chapters of the first book.
Wow.
So that was sometime in November of 2009, and the first book came out in November of 2010.
Wow.
So that's how it occurred.
Excellent. And so now you are 3 books in, as far as what's published. We have Maps of Fate, which is the series, but also the title of the first book, right?
Yeah, you know, it's a huge story. It begins in 1854. It ends in the real time of the contemporary West, 2021, which is when the last book will be out. It's 33 books.
Wow.
It's really, I mean, if you want to boil it down and use common book vernacular, if you want to use common book vernacular, it's really 5 series within an epic saga. But it's the same characters, just different generations of the characters. You're following 5 generations of characters, these 11 very different lineages, you know, men and women of uncommon cultures and different origins, competing ambitions, some dark, some really light, and how they weave together into the tapestry of the country in the West, you know, over that 170 plus or minus years. So each of the series we call eras, and they're divided into time frames. 1854 to 1875 is the Maps of Fate era, 8 books. 1875 to 1900 is the North to Wyoming era, 7 books. And then we get into the Canyons era, which is the Dust Bowl, the Depression, World War I, the Roaring Twenties, the beginning of progressivism. And then Coming Thunder begins in 1939, that era, which is, you know, the advent of World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, all the things that happened in that tumultuous contemporary time period. And then finally, we wind up with the last 3 books of the series, which will end in 2021. The last book is written, by the way, and that's called, and that era is called Summits. So it is a fascinating story to write. And I try and write, Leora, I try and write all these books and all these lineages from their perspective. In other words, the Compact of 1850 and the treaties of 1855 were viewed entirely different by the Sioux than they were by the Europeans. And, you know, it's interesting as I write the book because you can see the lack of communication, the misunderstandings, and knowing history in retrospect, you can see the seeds of conflict being planted at every step.
Wow.
It's really fascinating.
So, you know, the thing that struck you that evening, that was the catalyst. You know, so many people have moments from time to time, they never act on them, you know, but you did. And not only did you, but when we first met, I think that you were still thinking of 3 books, that it had grown from 1 to 3. And it just seems like it's amazing to consider. I mean, the kind of mind that can conceive of 33 books and kind of have it all mapped out, talking about maps of fate so well. So has that just been for you a natural evolution? Has it been a struggle? How has that been?
Well, I mean, you could say it's amazing. You could also say it's many other things.
Yeah, but we're keeping it G-rated.
You know, the bottom line of the story is that when I outlined it, I mean, it was a story that I'd been kicking around in my head for 30 years.
Really?
You know? Yes. So it comes easily. I mean, it's tough to find the time to write, but when I write like the wind, you know. I mean, a lot of authors struggle with getting out 200 or 500 words a day, and I can sit down, if I have a block of time, I mean, 5,000, 10,000 words, they just rock it. I know the story. I know the people. And the more I write, the more I befriend the characters. The more I understand their nuances and their reactions, whether proactive or reactive to certain situations. You know, it requires no thought. It's just natural. They are all, in their own ways, extensions of me, or I extensions of them. I mean, I couldn't tell you which is which. So the overall story, I originally thought I could do in about 900,000 words. That would have been 6 books, give or take, 130,000, 140,000 words a book. But as I began writing them, you know, book 1 begins in May of 1854. It's 360 pages, and it ends on March 18th, 1855. And Maps of Fate, which is it's 452 pages, 11 font, probably 600 pages, 12 font. That book literally goes from March 18th, 1855 to May 27th, 1855. And Uncompahgre, incredible as this seems, 480 pages.
Which is the 3rd one.
Goes from May 27th, 1855 to July 3rd, 1855. So as I began writing, I realized that to get the detail and the texture and the color, and to really do each of these lineages, each of these men and women of uncommon cultures and differing origins, to truly portray them was going to be far more words. So I re-outlined the series approximately a year and a half ago, and realized that it could not be done if I was going to do all the lineages through the entire time period and kind of make this an icon, if you will. It could not be done in under 3.5 million words. So that's where 33 books comes, because nobody really wants to pick up, a tome of 1,000 pages. Right. So I'm trying to keep all the books between 360 and 480 pages, so they're nice long reads, but not too long a read. And we can take breaks in the action, shall we say, that titillate the reader to move on.
Right. And so for those who haven't started the series yet, though, they can start the first one and then move right into the second one. So the first one is Threads West, The second is Maps of Fate. And the third one is Un Compadre. Did I pronounce that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so the fourth one is titled Moccasin Tracks, right?
Moccasin Tracks, you bet.
Okay, here we are back with Reid. This is part two. Looks like our technology is holding out so far. So Reid, we were, I think, starting to talk about book 4, which is Moccasin Tracks. And would you like to pick up?
You know what the information superhighway is in Wyoming, don't you, Leora?
What is it?
2 pickups pulled over on the side of the road, facing opposite directions, talking out the window.
That's good. That's true.
All right.
And I've been out there.
The fourth,
long, lonely stretches of road out there.
yeah. The fourth book, Moccasin Tracks, is about ready to come out. We had to switch distributors, which was quite an interesting experience. The publishers decided that it needed to be done after we discovered some interesting things. How's that? And one of these days I'm going to do a full blog on that because there's a number of other authors that need that information. It's very important. Why don't we just say that not properly investigating or monitoring your distributors can cost you money, and they're not going to tell you about it. In any event, that switcheroo is about done. We're going to be with Greenleaf now, which is a terrific outfit. We're very excited, actually. You know, all things have a silver lining, and this is a big step up. They're one of the best in the country and very proactive, which many distributors are not.
So that's for just a second, for those of us, for those in the audience who might be planning on publishing. So Greenleaf is your distributor, but not the publisher. Is that correct?
Greenleaf will be the distributor as of November 4th. So in the hierarchy of the book world, you know, putting aside agents and all the ancillary folks who run around, you have the author who writes the book, you have the editors who edit the book and fight with the author, and then you have the publisher who takes care of, shall we say, cover, art, interior layout, printing, and many other things. I mean, a good publisher is terrific. Ours are great. And then you have the distributor. I mean, if you're not a big 6 publisher, you know, or now a big 5 after the recent mergers, almost all publishers, medium, even large publishers, have distributors. And distributors are those folks to whom all the product goes, and many of them also try and glom onto your ebooks, yet another tale. And they distribute the books out to various vendors: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Hastings, independent bookstores, warehouses, Costco, you name it. And that's what the distributor's job is. The distributor takes care of the shipping, the resupply, the inventory control, and generally gets a commission. The commissions can range from distributor to distributor. Each deal is slightly negotiable, and each distributor has a slightly different MO. But the distributor kind of takes the place of the pretty significant staff that the big 5 publishers would have in terms of getting product out the door. So that's kind of how it works.
Okay.
What else can I tell you?
No, that's good. I thought you were going to take this. So now you were talking about you changed distributors to this Greenleaf.
Yes, and we're very excited about that, and that's going to be officially announced November 4th. So everybody listening to this broadcast has a scoop. It's a scoop.
Okay, so so when you say November 4th, that's the changeover. So when is the book actually coming out? Do you have a date yet?
The release of the books is up in the air due to this distributor situation. You simply can't bring books out through a distribution source that can't be trusted. It's not good for the reader because books simply don't get to shelves, don't get to stores. It's not good for the publisher. Books don't get accounted for. And obviously it's hugely frustrating for the author. That would be me. So books 4, 5, and 6 will absolutely be out next year. The first 2 books will be out in the first 6 months of the year. And the last book, Blood of Glorietta Pass, seems to be on time for September. of 2015. Folks can go to the website. We'll be updating it constantly, and we'll keep you informed. Also as to where the books are, if there's any shortages, sellouts, etc. I mean, the website's great, full of information. Very worth signing up to. And not a lot of emails that go out to bug people, I might add. Publishers do a great job on it.
And then the 7th book, which is Cache Valley, going to be a great book where some of the characters, I don't want to go into too much of it, but some of the characters that you've met in previous novels, that book is kind of centered on them. Some of the other characters are kind of on the move, as was the want in the 1860s in the American West. And, Cache Valley is an area of, should we say rather devout Mormonism over in the southern Idaho, northern Utah area, and a beautiful area, I might add. So that's pretty cool. And then the 8th book, of course, begins the next era, or should we say series within the epic saga, and that's North to Wyoming, which is a pretty cool book. In fact, the first 3 or 4 books of that part of the series, that era, will be set right here in the area that you yourself have visited.
Yeah, I can see you're eager to be getting on with that. You just have every day, it's rich with vistas that you can write about, right?
One of the things which stands me in good stead in writing these stories is that I have, in many ways, lived the scene, which makes it much easier to describe. I mean, when I make a description, you'll note, in the books that the first part of each chapter, first couple paragraphs, kind of sets the scene. It is the setting. And, once I write that, it's kind of a portal. I know people will shake their heads and go, this guy really needs a straitjacket. But
no,
it's a portal. Yeah, it's a portal through which I can step, and then I'm on the stage with the characters. And from there on, I'm just a scribe. They tell me the story. It's really true.
That's,
But that setting, all those settings are places, situations, times of the day, scenes, that I have seen, which of course makes it much easier to write about than trying to conjure one up. I must say that I kind of chuckle once in a while. I don't have a lot of time to read other books, although I used to be a voracious reader, but once in a while I'll pick up a historical fiction of the American West. And these books are foremost historical fiction. They have romantic threads. They're the story of America set in the West, but they are historical fiction. And of all the awards that they've won, 20 now in the last 3 years.
Fantastic.
The 4 for Best Historical Fiction of the Year are the ones I'm most proud of. That's the attaboy for research, authenticity, correct historical recording. When you do pick up some of these other books, I shall not name any names, but, and the character saddles the horse wrong, or, the weaponry is like off, you have a 1970s rifle nomenclature for an 1870s scene, or things like that. I understand now, although I didn't before I started writing, how many readers of historical fiction put a book down and they'll never pick it up again, because it loses its authenticity.
Yeah, and I guess there are many, though, who will never know that.
Well, yeah, there are some who won't know that, but, some of these things are pretty blatant.
Yeah, I see. Well, and I've heard about that from other writers. And I've also, going back for a minute to your concept of the portal, entering a portal into a different world. As you know, my husband Coleman is working on writing his first novel, which is turned into a 3 novel series. And he was talking about the same thing. Pardon me?
Pretty soon it'll be 30.
Right, exactly. This seems to be the way it goes. Well, but actually, totally. I mean, you can totally see where there are characters that cannot be given, center stage in any given novel, and yet deserve to have their story told, right? Which is how you end up, with these side. In fact, my daughter Devani was telling me, whom you know because she works for you, was telling me earlier that J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter is now coming up with side stories of her original Harry Potter series, and you can see as a writer how that could happen.
But you get intrigued with these characters. I mean, I love the Sue family, who comes into the story in book 2, Maps of Fate, Eagle Talon and Walks with Moon. I mean, I love those characters.
Yeah.
And the Ute Indian family, Chief Ure, his wife Black Mirror, and their young friend Chipita. Another fascinating set of new characters coming into the fray, if you will, in book 3. And you could write your entire life. You could write an entire series on one of these characters. Never mind the combination of all the lineages in one epic tale.
Right, exactly. And so one of the things that Coleman was saying is that he says, I know it's going to sound strange, kind of like what you said, but these characters start to talk to you and tell you their story, and they're the ones writing it in the end. And that's been your experience as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, they were writing the story in the beginning.
Right.
It takes you a while to understand who's in control.
Exactly. And you turn it over. Now, you were telling me off the record, before we started the recordings, I hope it's okay that I mention this, that you don't do the typing really. You talk into a recorder and someone else is typing it for you. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. My typing, I can do about 80, 90 words a minute, but that's 30 typos a line. I mean, the spell check takes longer than the typing. And after I typed just a few pages of inserts in book 1, the publisher said, we're going to do all of us a favor. Do not touch a keyboard. We have a typist for you, my friend, and you just do your dragon speak dictation, mark up and the way I do it is literally I dictate a chapter at a time. I mean, I can, as we were discussing previously, I can write like the wind when I have the time.
And that's
talking. So I dictate chapter at a time.
So what you're really doing is talking like the wind.
I dictate a chapter at a time. I print it out. I edit it. It looks horrible. Chicken scratch everywhere. I put it on the fax machine back to New York. And voila, 2 hours later, I get something without a bunch of scribbles on it. And then I edit again. And we keep going through that process until it's done.
Wow, that's amazing because, for me anyway, when I write, and I'm not writing fiction, but just nonfiction things that I write, I do my best writing it while I see it on paper, and I rearrange it that way. It takes, I think, a special mind though to be able to, and you're really good at it. You can tell by the way you do the interview, by the way you do speaking engagements. You're really good at formulating things in your mind before you speak it. So you have a vast capacity to see it all out and then to recapitulate that in very eloquent fashion.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, bottom line is you're saying I can talk myself out of any pile of manure, right? There you go.
No, what I'm really saying is that you're one of the original, best, great storytellers, not just writer, but the true and genuine storyteller, which I think is really quite a gift. I mean, clearly, so it's so wonderful that you've finally started doing that and doing it in such a big way. I mean, really, when you think about it, you said to me before that you knew that these books would be good and that they would really, they would be a success. But I think perhaps even you didn't realize how much of a success, with so many awards and so many, first place rankings and such, right? It's been gratifying because it's been your first effort at publishing novels and it's been highly successful. Look, it's going into movies, into miniseries, right?
Yeah, it really has taken me by surprise. It's rather humbling. I mean, every time we win an award, I go, holy moly, And the books are up against some tough, huge authors and books. So it's gratifying, it's humbling, it's a nice pat on the back, but even if it wasn't occurring, I mean, even if it didn't have #1 best-selling rankings and all sorts of categories and the awards, etc., I mean, I'd still be writing it because, you know, there's a mission behind, well, besides the fact I love the story, love the characters, and feel compelled to get this story paper. I mean, there's really not been an attempt to do this before. I mean, there's been some singular books which have done a wonderful job. You know, Missioner Centennial is a great book, and he does I think, tremendous job, particularly limited to one book. But there's been no attempt to really write an icon, you know, a reference book of us. And so I consider it an honor, and I consider it a mission. And the fact that people are liking it, you know, that's the icing on the cake. We get, oh God, you know, I give out my cards at book signings and stuff, and we sell a lot of books. I think it was 7,000 books at book signings last year.
Wow.
And every person gets a card. In fact, the card is also one of the bookmarks. And I can't, you know, so people have my cell number, you know, which is kind of crazy.
Uh-oh, hang on, Reid, you locked up.
It's a week.
Hang on.
You know.
Wait 1 second. It locked up after you said people have your cell number, which is kind of crazy, and then it locked. So what did we miss?
Well, not much.
Okay.
No, but so, you know, each week I get probably 10 phone calls. You know, I pick up the phone, yeah, this is Reid, and it's, hi, this is Sally Lou in Ashcraft, North Carolina. I just finished your third book. I love these books. Where the hell is the fourth book? You know, that kind of thing, which is really, it's pretty cool, you know.
Yeah.
And you get to have this personal interaction like you do at book signings, which is, you know, the art of eyeball-to-eyeball selling, I think, has been lost on many authors. They rely strictly on social media, and it's a big mistake. But you get to know your readers, and you get to, there's not a reader who calls me or writes me that I don't ask, which is your favorite book? Why is it your favorite book? Who's your favorite character? Who don't you like? What would you do differently? I mean, the feedback that you get talking eyeball to eyeball from somebody in a bookstore who's come in to buy book 3, they've read book 1 or 2, or somebody who's just beginning the series, a brand new reader, or on the phone or through emails, is you can do all the sophisticated surveys in the world, and our publishers do lots of surveys. You've seen them. And the information's great, and people love it, and they have a contest, and, you know, the top 10 people in the survey get whatever they get. But nothing supplants whatsoever the ability to look somebody in the eye, sell him your book, sell him or her your book, and get feedback on what they read. I mean, you can't get more down the trenches for market research. And, you know, the stuff that I am told, the feedback that I get from all these great folks, great readers, it gets incorporated. I listen, you know. One of the things, as you know, book 1, which was a phenomenal success the day literally that it came out. I mean, at 9:07 a.m. in the morning, it melted down Amazon.
Yeah.
And an hour later, Barnes & Noble was sold out nationally, much to my complete shock. But, you know, that book, we got feedback. We found out that only 6 in 10 of the people were converting to the rest of the series, the conversion factor. And a typical series is around 5. I mean, it was still better than normal. In other words, 5 people who read the first book in the series go on to read the rest of the books. For whatever reason, 5 do not. So book 1, there were 6 people converting to the rest of the series. And I talked to a lot of people. What didn't you like? And there were several things in that book, particularly for women, that they did not. They loved the story. They liked the book. I mean, there's always people who are going to like the book, you know, like the story, like the. I mean, that's the way it is.
Right.
But these are people who would have continued other than blank, blank, and blank.
Yeah.
And, you know, when the TV folks came and said, we'd really like to see some extra stuff in book 1, which gave me the impetus, the catalyst to rewrite book 1. which we call the reprint book. The old books are the collector's books. I jumped at it, and I corrected all those things. I went back to my notes, because I keep notes when I talk to people. I went back to my notes, and I completely, I took some stuff out, rewrote other things, added some chapters, softened up some pretty brutal scenes, and the conversion rate is now 8.8 on book one. 8.8. And that's all market, that's eyeball to eyeball market feedback.
One of the things I heard talking with authors when it comes to book signings, and the reason that seems to have gone by the wayside, is because so often the audience, the readers, don't show up very much anymore. I don't know if that's because they're not interested, because getting a signature from an author is no longer considered a big deal, or because of the marketing about the event is not so great. I'm not sure, but that's what I've heard. However, in your signings, you're seeing good returns. You're seeing a lot of response, aren't you?
Well, a number of publishers have asked me to put on seminars for their authors. In a few cases I have. And I've actually thought seriously. We did one public event this past year, which was really well attended. The art of eyeball to eyeball selling, which, by the way, will hone your skills as an author, as a writer. I can't tell you how many benefits it has. Not to mention greatly expanding your mailing list. Nobody comes to my book signing and doesn't give me their email. We added over 4,000 names to our email list just from book signings in the last 6 months.
Wow.
And these people, you don't have to worry about them hitting the opt-in button. They buy your book, they willingly put their email down on your sign-up pad, and they're in. So there's a lot of advantages to it, but the biggest advantage, and the thing that most authors, I think, really fall short on is, number one, they rely on social media. They really think social media is the end-all, be-all. It's had all the hype, et cetera. And listen, social media is very important. We sell a lot of books over social media, and, the publisher works all that stuff. I personally never Twittered, twatted, whatever it is, and I don't ever will. But, they take care of all that stuff. I do, not all the posts, but all the responses, et cetera, on Facebook are me. That one I tend to personally. And we probably reach, with friends of friends and friends of fans and all that kind of stuff, 3 million-ish people. That's a lot of people to reach.
It is.
Plus our websites, et cetera. So all that plays a huge role. But let me tell you that somebody getting a message or an alert or whatever you get from Facebook when I put up a post or I make a response or I do a like or whatever, is their reaction is far differently. It's far different than if they have met me and know me, than if they have not.
Sure.
It is absolutely, the people who respond on the Facebook pages, with very few exceptions, all people I have met at eyeball-to-eyeball book sales events. They are habitual responders. And I think that's really important. The second thing is that a lot of authors, and your comment kind of solidified this, if you will, a lot of authors think, okay, well, Barnes & Noble's going to put out their banner, and they're going to put their thing in the paper, and they're going to put my little table out there, and I'm going to have my little sign, and I'm going to sit there in my chair, and everybody's just going to walk up to me and say, give me 10 of them books. Well, you know what? BS. Not going to happen. Okay, number one, I don't have a chair at my table. I have never sat down for 1 second at a book signing. I am on my feet. If somebody walks in, and I insist on a certain placement in the stores, you don't give me that placement, I won't sign at your store. And I will tell you that there are stores, Barnes & Noble and otherwise, that, and I'm not saying this to be ostentatious, but they fight over when I'm going to be in. We were watching and laughing over 2 stores, one in Salt Lake and one in Denver, fighting over which store I was going to sign at the last 3 days before Christmas. They finally compromised. I'm signing at one for 3 days, and then the last 3 days before Christmas, I'm signing at the other. So they worked that out with some kind of agreement that next year they'd switch.
So for them,
the bottom line is that you have to be proactive. Nobody walks in or out of that store without me there.
Right.
Introducing myself with my book, with my card, here's my table, come on over, blah, blah, blah. And listen, 5 times out of 10, particularly if they are a paranormal or sci-fi reader, I'm not going to get them. But they have my card. And particularly around holidays, I'll say, well, listen, you may be up in the stratosphere on the spaceship, but there must be somebody in your family who loves American history. Oh, yeah. Well, I said, where are you going to get a gift like this? I mean, look, there's all sorts of ways to turn a no into a yes, but the bottom line is that you cannot replace eyeball-to-eyeball book selling. As I mentioned, we did about 7,000 books of book signings last year. Now, we average, there are days that we have done 200 books at a book signing. By the way, my deal with all the stores, I want no advertising. I do not need a banner. You do not have to list this in your online deal. You don't have to do squat. Here's what I want. I want a table. I can bring my own tablecloth, and I want it right here in your store, and I want cashiers up there that can ring up the books. That's all you got to do. And they love it. They love it. And we're now at the point where the stores, the 60, 70, whatever that we sign at regularly, we're now at a point where literally we contact them and we say, you need 100 of book 1, 70 of book 2, 50 of book 3, blah, 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 blah. And that's what's on the table when I walk in, because they know that inventory is going to be moved. And to the extent not, people will be back in to get it. That's the kind of relationship authors have to set up with stores. A lot of stores are difficult to deal with, and you just have to be persistent. I mean, even with our signing track record, there's still some stores we call and, you're not John Grisham, so we don't want you, okay? But I will tell you that, we also sign at military bases by invitation, because it's all invitation stuff. And I've been told by every single base who have had some really big-name authors that, without exception, we have outsold every author they have ever had before. And it's all your approach, your setup, your marketing. Our tables, most authors come in and Barnes & Noble has their little plastic stands and you have the one book, whatever. We have all our own stuff. We have our own banners. We have our own tablecloths. I have leather skins which go over the table. We have our own bookshelves that we had specially made for a 6-foot table, an 8-foot table, a 10-foot table. Specifically with the awards.
But it's not just about the numbers of books that you sell. It's not about a unit count. Yeah, that's a great stat. It's really about talking to people, which I love, I don't like roofs. I don't like lights. I don't like neighbors closer than miles away. But when in a social situation, I must say I really like talking to people in these bookstores and at events, at these signings. People are great. You're talking to people who are old and young, men and women, people from all walks of life. You get their insights on political things, on, shall we say, the state of America at the time, their perceptions of the books. It's really interesting to talk to readers of the books. They're coming in to buy the next book or buy books for friends, and you get their feedback on what attracts them to the story, which, by the way, can vary. People like the books. Women see certain things in the books. Men see certain things in the books. The younger readers see other things in the books. The older readers, kind of see a replacement for the books they've read in the past. It's fascinating. And the people are great. They're just terrific. And I have a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun.
We're back to close up the interview for today with Reid Lance Rosenthal, author of mega successful, best-selling historical Western romance novel series, Threads West, an American Saga. And Reid, we left off talking about your bookstore signings and what authors today don't recognize about. Well, one of the things and one of the reasons I think that you've been so successful in the marketing is that you brought to writing a business mindset. You are already a successful businessman, real estate, rancher, and then you let your creative muse out finally and gave him center stage to write these fantastic and amazing novels. And you have now blended your business acumen, your incredible brilliance at figuring things out, and you've applied it in every situation, including not just the concept of how to market the books, but essentially how to connect with people. So that's one of the things that I think has really helped and worked for you, is you really connect with your audience, and they connect through the story. So that's what you were sharing, and that's what I got out of that. But I would like to shift, if I could, back to when you were talking about the stories writing themselves and how you love the characters in the incredible saga, and talk about Threads West. So many incredible, intricate threads of tapestry from our origins of our ancestors to where we are today. But that includes not just your knowing a little bit of history from your area, and not only your sense of character, and it has to include a good bit of research, right?
It's a huge amount of research.
So are you doing most of that yourself?
By the way, are you getting like an intermittent flashing of some phone symbol or something?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It shouldn't be there, but that's because you're dialed in on the voice sign, and that's what I was trying to get rid of. It wasn't there earlier, but we're just going to have to ignore it.
All right. Anyway, people probably rather look at the phone sign than my ugly maw at any event.
You know, what happens is that when you talk, it lights up because it thinks that that's where you are. Since you're on, why it didn't do it earlier, I don't know.
All right. Well,
so we'll just have to.
You haven't sold me on this. Yeah, I'm not sold on this technology yet, Leora.
I understand. Hey, but we're face to face, Reid, and there you are in Wyoming.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, the research is huge. You know, I did all the research myself on book one. And can you see me now?
Yes. Can you not see yourself?
No. Oh, yes, I can.
Okay.
My thing's going in and out. Everybody who's listening to this, you ought to get, you got to understand. I have to give everybody some backdrop here. Here's my computer technology. On, off, attach, delete, and send. That's it. Above that, I find somebody who can do it, I hire somebody who can do it, or I don't do it.
Right.
So this is a novel experience for me. That's going about like I thought it would.
Okay. Another novel experience. Let me see if I can get rid of talking. I'm going to see if I can get rid of that box, okay? But go ahead while you're talking.
Kind of an epic saga. The history is huge, and the historical accuracy is very important. The research, which I did completely myself for book one, and which I still do in terms of the nuggets. I mean, there's stories within these books. You know, Newfoundland saves 17 sailors off a sinking Norwegian frigate. There's a dog by the name of Sam. All sorts of really, you know, little what I call nuggets of history. And people go, how did you think of that? You know what? I didn't have to think of it. It's real history. And I do all the nugget research myself. But since the books took off, the publishers have given me, not full-time, but mostly full-time research assistant who does the general history research for me. You know, the big treaties, all the big events in history that most people have read about in school, but all the underlying goodies. You know, how a river was crossed, how they turned the Conestogas over, wrapped them with hides to make them boats. I mean, all that kind of stuff, that comes from my research. And it's fascinating because I really thought I knew this period in American history. I've been a history buff since I was little. I didn't know squat. I mean, I got to tell you, there isn't a chapter I write where I have to do some research that I don't learn something which either I didn't know even existed, or which completely flabbergasted me, gives you a whole different perspective on an historical event. Particularly, I might add, when you're writing from the perspectives. from the viewpoint, the peculiar viewpoint of each of these lineages of very uncommon characters. You know, I used the example early in the interview of the Sioux and the Europeans looking at the same treaty. But you can go down the list, and each of these major historical events affected each one of these characters. So really, you have to weave in the viewpoints of 11 different lineages, their view, their perception of historical event, and its effect, its impact on their life and their traditions. It's fascinating to write. I'm learning a lot about America.
Well,
You know?
and the wonderful thing is, since you love history anyway, you know, you're enjoying that part of the process, I imagine.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the process is great. I mean, you know, I wish I could read faster. And here's the interesting thing. No matter how much research you think you have done for a book, you get into a chapter, the characters divert you because they go, no, this is not where the story is going. This is where the story is going. And all of a sudden you have something you have to research you had not a clue when you outlined the book or even began the chapter that you would be delving into within the context of the story.
Are you able to do most of your research through Google?
No. I mean, some of the research is done online, some is done through museums, a lot is done through memoirs of pioneers, cavalry, even Indians, to the extent that they were transcribed back then. You know, in book 3, and I don't want to give away too much, there's a ceremony. And the characters told me they wanted the ceremony to happen in this Ute Indian village. Well, when I started researching the ceremony, that ceremony was almost never done by the Utes. Only in a blue moon would they perform this particular ceremony. Trying to find information on the Ute performance of this particular ceremony was almost impossible. I mean, I spent probably 2 weeks putting together bits, pieces, some special events, and you know, I've gotten compliments from members of the Ute Nation saying, you know, it's probably the best description of this ceremony that's been put on paper.
Nice.
But I got it from a zillion different sources that I had to spend 2 weeks searching out a sentence here, a word here, a certain type of a rattle that they use for the ceremony here. It's really fascinating stuff.
So what you're describing, Reid, sounds like a whole other nonfiction series that needs to go up and be available online for people to find, so that they can find the, you know, because one of the things that you were talking about, some of the writers that you've picked up and discovered here and there use kind of misinformation, write things in ways that wouldn't really hold up to historical fact or even logistical fact sometimes. And I think that one of the things that can happen is that the further we get, like you were talking about, some of the ethic of spirit or the fiber of spirit sometimes can seem to be lost in today's world from what it was with our ancestors who pioneered this land. And it seems like similarly, so can the facts and the truth. You know, history is his story. So it's whoever said or wrote something. So it seems like the research that you've uncovered, like the Ute Indians said, would be valuable to then post online in its authentic, non-fictionalized form. Meaning
yeah. Well, one of the things I'm probably going to do here in the, I don't want to say near future, because right now I'm focused on the books, but I am going to, we're going to have a blog that's going to be added to the websites, which will be kind of an historical fact blob, Freudian deal.
Yeah.
But it's going to have some of these historical things that I've uncovered that really don't appear to exist anywhere. I mean, somewhere there has to be something, but I haven't found them.
That's excellent.
And I think that'll be pretty fascinating for people too, you know, and it'll be a nonfiction blog. For instance, this ceremony, I would love to put in nonfiction historical blog on the websites, but it would be giving away a significant, shall we say, episode in book 3. So I have to wait till we're kind of down the road a bit.
Yeah, well, that'd be fantastic. Meanwhile, I guess it could get started with whatever you've uncovered in books 1 and 2. But I don't know if you are familiar with Google's efforts to go back in and sort of virtually scan in every historical book that's ever, in the world. Essentially, obviously, a huge monumental task, but something that's achievable over time. So they're very much in favor of those kinds of things being loaded up, and you may even find some. So that's a very favorable thing, and it sounds like yours will be just right up that alley as far as contributing to the knowledge base of the world, the truth of the true knowledge.
Yeah, and we haven't talked much about the Land for Love and Money series.
No, yeah, let's cover that.
That series also is something that I've really wanted to write for a long time. I've been blessed with a lot of experience in real estate. 3 countries, 2 continents, too many states to count, and all sorts of transactions from small to huge with all sorts of people. And I've always been fascinated by the fact, some odd things fascinate me, but one of the things that fascinates me about real estate transactions is that no transaction, if you think about it, is ever the same. There's never the same buyer with exactly the same impetus, personality, needs, wants, whatever. There's never the same seller with their peculiar personal idiosyncrasies. It's never the same property. If it is the same property, it's at a different point in the property's evolution. So every deal is absolutely unique from every other real estate transaction that has ever in all those really important ingredients. I mean, sure, everybody signs the papers and they have the HUD forms and they have the ranch, environmental impact assessment, and yeah, that's standard. But the nuances, the critical meat of the deal, the buyer, the seller, and the property, is never the same. It's kind of like when I write a scene in the historical novels, or I take one of my photos. That scene will never be repeated, ever. It'll never be the exact same moment in the exact same season with the exact same sun angle, with the exact same cloud cover, with the exact same wind, humidity, air clarity, you name it. You're capturing a piece of, shall we say, natural history that in that nanosecond, there will never be a nanosecond like it again. So that kind of stuff fascinates me. And it's one of the reasons I wrote the Land for Love and Money series, because it's really about transactions and people's dealing with one another. Unlike other real estate books, it's written anecdotally. So these are true stories. I mean, this is stuff that I have lived.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I want to get into that more fully, but why don't we do that on another interview another day? Because there are other things that I would like to, and we'll still post that with this interview and the links to that, and but for future, we'll set up a time, because I want to go more deeply so that we can give a good bit of time and effort to that, not for a number of reasons. What I would like to kind of close this session with, if that's okay with you, if it works for you, and that is,
the real reason comes out. You want to get rid of me.
No, not at all. I want to honor your time.
And dumped. No problem.
Not at all. I want to honor your time, and also I want.
I'm going to curl into a fetal ball and get underneath the computer table.
Not you. Totally not you. Also, I want to come back when we don't have this distracting phone icon showing up on our screen. So we'll get our we'll figure out the technology on that better next time. But what I'm really interested in too, Reid, and I know that because the other things that we can talk about is your ecology and your care, your stewardship of your land. That's a whole other topic that is very deep for you. The ranches that you are steward of and that you run are deep, and how you do that is very interesting. But what's also interesting, I think important for the baby boomers and beyond, which is the name of this site, is I get the sense that so many people, not unlike you from a number of years, even though you were very involved in real estate and you probably are the kind of guy who love whatever you do, find a way to enjoy yourself. At the same time, there are so many people in our generation who have sort of, I think, lost track of their passion and vision and that the kind of things that light them up. I think that part of our energy crisis is not just, in terms of resources, but it's more the resource of human spirit and human capital, from the standpoint of people who are ignited with life, who are fired up, who are not, kind of the living zombies in the world. And that part of what needs to happen is for people to reconnect with their passions, like you have done. Connect with the passion of writing, connect with the passion of land or history, and then do something about it. So what I'd like to close with, if you would, your thoughts and what you can share to help inspire people or motivate people, or what it is that works for you relative to getting fired up, and rather than winding down the second half of life. Because I look at 55, I look at, gosh, I've got 50 something years left. What can I do in 50 years? And so many people our age are thinking of retiring and doing less. You and I are doing more and thinking of how much more we can do. So what can you say to that?
First of all, how do you spell retire?
Exactly.
I'm busier now probably than I've been at almost any point in my life. For the most part, however, each activity, each suck on my time, if you will, is something I really like. In fact, the juggling act between these things I love and where to devote the time, energy, resources when I want to, plus when it's demanded, is really one of the most frustrating parts of this stage of my life. I really think people need to, number one, I think you described it perfectly. You need to decide what you love, and if you don't love something, you need to find something to love, whatever that is. I mean, maybe it's sitting naked in a cross-knee position with your hands clasped in front of you, chanting Om in a teepee full of incense. I mean, if that's what you love to do, go do it, and then find out a way to get paid to do what you love. Maybe you can do a reality show on sitting naked, cross-legged in a teepee, smoking incense. That's number one. Number two, once you find it and you figure out how to monetize it, I mean, listen, I love to write books. As I said, I'd be writing them with or without all these fabulous readers all across the world. It just came out in Icelandic, by the way, which is kind of cool. But I'd write them anyway because I love the story and I love to write. But the fact that I can write a book and get a check, makes it that much more rewarding. It's kind of like the pat on the back from the market saying they like what you're doing. And, there's a lot of self-satisfaction and overt satisfaction in something like that. I think for somebody who's motivated like you and I, they already know this. Okay. I mean, they've figured this out. For many of those people who are unfortunately not yet motivated and who are at the retirement age, the baby boom age, all that stuff, 50, 55, 60, 65, whatever age. You folks, number one, you need to take the word retirement out of anything you own, anything you write, any pamphlets you have, throw them in the trash. There's no such thing as retiring. Okay? It's merely stepping into another realm. And you need to find out, and listen, it might be traveling, maybe somebody likes to travel. I just like to travel. That's what I want to do when I quote unquote retire. Well, figure out a way to monetize that retirement, that travel. You can become a travel reviewer. You can start your own radio show on travel hotspots. I mean, there's a million ways. There's nothing, literally, that can't be monetized. Nothing. Zero. Nada. Even sitting naked in a teepee, sitting in.
Right.
I mean, I'm convinced of that. There's a market that would love to watch an hour of a guy saying "Om" in a teepee. There is,
Yeah.
right? You just have to reach that market and have the product for them. But there's a sense of satisfaction that comes that's far beyond any pecuniary benefit, any financial flow of doing something that you truly love. You know, in my case, I guess if you boil down all my loves, it comes down to the land. And it doesn't matter whether it's a nonfiction series or the fiction series, the enduring character is always the land. So everything that gives me pleasure in my heart, in my soul, has to do with the land, whether it's writing about it, whether it's portraying a story which has occurred on it, whether it's out working on it, whether it's preserving or enhancing it, whatever it is. I mean, that is kind of the fulcrum of all my other passions. So I would suggest to people that not only do you think about what your passions might be, but you decide what that fulcrum is. And from that fulcrum, you choose the tangents that you can monetize that keeps you close to the center point. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. That sounds fantastic. And one of the things that you've discovered, as have I, and that is that once you embark in the direction of your dreams, one step at a time, the vistas open up. So, you know, people might not know and might not have a sense of, like you said, being connected with anything in particular, but they might have a sense of something. And so whatever that first sense is, follow that like the path into the woods. And once you get on that journey, you will see the other paths that become evident and you'll create your own. So don't wait to get started. Just start, you know, once walking steadily in the direction of what you perceive to be your dreams, and vistas will open up.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you, Leora, and I think you're bringing a great service to the market by reminding people of that fact. Because you're right. I mean, many people are kind of lost right now, and they're lost not only because of personal situations, but they're lost because, you know, we are in a time period. One of the motivations for writing the historical series, we're in a time period where the values of America are being subverted. We're in a time period where our trust in a government of the people has been either eliminated or severely eroded. And I don't care whether you're liberal, conservative, Democrat, Libertarian, Republican. Nobody listening to this show can tell me that you believe everything the government tells you anymore. It just isn't true. And you know, and there's an attack on religion. I mean, I'm a very spiritual person in the sense of the old Indian feeling and awe and revere of spirit. In terms of, if you want to put it in a more modern parlance, the Force, if everybody remembers, you know, Star Wars.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, Star Wars was a hugely spiritual movie. I mean, people look at me like, are you nuts when I say, but it's true. The Force is God. Spirit is God. You know, Buddha is God. God is God. Jesus is God. I mean, I don't care what you worship. But because that concept of a force greater than us, whether you call it God and you envision it as a old guy with a staff with a long white beard, or you envision it as some poor guy up on a cross, or you envision it as some man on a mountain getting the 10 Commandments, or whether you vision it more as an energy which is interconnected, interrelates, flows through all things, animate and inanimate, can be sensed and channeled and directed for good and evil. Whatever your belief system is, it's under attack by people who don't want you to believe, because they want you to believe in their power. A narcissistic attempt to control every aspect of your life. And once again, that is, believe it or not, that's an apolitical viewpoint. The family is under attack. The Constitution is under attack. The unity of this country is under attack. And I think not only are people who tend to get lost just within themselves kind of lost, But I think when all the things that they've valued and treasured, become used to, have invested in, are vested in, when they come under attack and they see them crumbling, I think they get even more lost. And so the lesson is to go back to what made this country and its people great, which is self-reliance. Don't look to the government. Don't look just to religion. I'm not saying not be religious. Don't look to just this deity or that deity or this concept or that concept. Look to yourself. Okay? You want a hand? Look at the end of your arm. It'll respond.
Yeah.
You just have to ask it to move.
I agree. That's very well said. And at the end of that arm and that hand also is basically the discovery of self. You know, when we put ourselves and apply and become more self-reliant, that is when we discover more who we really are and what we're made of.
That's right. I mean, the more we internalize, I know this sounds crazy, but it's true if you really think about it. The more we internalize, the better we are individually and the more productive member of an overall community we are.
Yeah.
It does not start with community. It starts with self.
Yes.
Self is the building block of community, not vice versa.
Agree. 100%. That's excellent and well said, Reid. It's a great point for us to close off the part 3 of our first time saga.
This could be a book in and of itself, Leah.
That's right. That's right. The technology part, and then the. But I look forward to scheduling. Sorry.
Zoom interview, chapter 22.
That's right. Right. I look forward to scheduling with you for part 2 and part 3 as far as the Land for Love and Money, and maybe some of the history of your ranches. I remember this. Well, I don't want to get off on the track, but some of the things that we learned and experienced when we were visiting with you. So let's connect. I'll send you a copy of the interview when it is ready to post, and we'll take it from there. But thanks so much for your time and for being patient with working out the kinks in the technology.
Not a problem. It's actually been kind of fun.
Good. I wish I could hug you, but it's sure great seeing you.
Great seeing you too, kiddo. Thank you for the invite.
You're welcome. Talk soon.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.